Networking is kind of one version of the talking to people, and then just reaching out to people that are doing something that you think is interesting. I heard this podcast called Fly the Transition, and this guy was doing something that sounded exactly like what I want to do. I figured out a way to get in touch with him, but he responded, and he responded with generosity and continuous engagement.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Fly the Transition, where we explore the journeys of people making bold moves into careers in aviation. I'm your host, Jim, and before we jump into today's episode, just a couple of quick personal updates. If you've been following the podcast for any amount of time, you know that I've been working on my CF5 for way too many months. So for those of you who have tried to do flight training with a busy life, busy career, you know what I mean when I'm saying that it feels sometimes like a never-ending journey. But the good news is here, next week I have plans to get back into the right seat and keep working on that CFI air work. I'm working on wrapping things up and getting everything done to finally cross that finish line, but I've got to get back up there in the air, work on my air work, and really polish those up, and then I'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable actually scheduling my check ride. So while it's taken longer than I originally imagined, I am still in it. So hopefully more updates on that in future episodes as well. On another note, I've got to be honest with all of you out the gate here. I was at a point about a month or so ago where I was about ready to shelve this podcast. Between my day job, flight training, the general whirlwind of family and life, I was starting to wonder if I could keep this thing going. I was stretching myself pretty thin, and I began thinking it was time to mothball Fly the Transition, at least for a little while. And then I got a message from Curt. Now, Curt didn't just reach out to me to pitch a story or ask to be on the show. He reached out to me because he wanted to say thank you. He had found Fly the Transition during his own aviation journey and listened episode by episode between his trips home and to the airport. And in our first interview that we did on the show, something clicked with him. He heard the story of Scott that mirrored what he wanted to be doing. And then instead of just saying, oh, well, that's a cool story, he took action. He would connect with our guest Scott, and he received all kinds of mentorship that really helped him carve out a real and tangible path. So now here we are, 51 episodes from Scott, and now you're going to hear from Curt. He is going to tell us about his journey and how one connection sparked a cascade of networking, mentorship, and guidance. And it played a role in Curt getting exactly where he dreamed of being, flying the King Air as part of a 135 operation, and supporting organ donation through medical transport missions, as well as flying corporate missions as well. Curt's story is going to be a great example of what happens when you combine opportunity with action. And it's also a great example of why I created this podcast in the first place. We're not just talking about aviation here. We're talking about transition, reinvention, and discovering what's possible in the second or even third chapter of your life at times. So if you're sitting on the fence thinking you missed your window, this episode is for you. And with that, let's jump into my conversation with Curt. All right. Well, Curt, welcome to the Fly the Transition podcast. It's great to have you, and I look forward to chatting with you tonight. I really appreciate you reaching out to be on the podcast, and I appreciate that I was able to, in some small way, help contribute to your direction in aviation. So that was really humbling for me to get that message from you.
Yeah, I figured I owed you at least a thank you for being a part of the journey. So, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and as just a quick aside, as we were emailing back and forth again today, like it's humbling for me, and there's moments where I go, man, should I keep doing this? Are people listening? And then it seems like every time I start having that thought, I get a couple emails that say, hey, this is a great thing you're doing. So I really appreciate the feedback, and it helps to fuel me too. So
excellent.
All right. So I think we're going to dive into your story here. Tell me how you first got exposed to aviation.
Well, I went to a music school for college out in Boston, and studying piano, studying recording engineering. And my piano teacher at the time, I would go to his studio for lessons weekly. And on the wall of his studio, he had a photograph of a Piper Cherokee. And, most other music studios I'd been in, you got photos of all the famous people that person has seen
Sure.
or played with, and autographs and all that. And so I asked Craig, why do you have a picture of an airplane in your studio? And he said, well, that's my personal airplane. I do recording sessions down in New York City, and it's much more efficient for me to fly down there and do a session and get back the same day. And I just thought that's weird. I've never heard of that. And he said, well, have you ever been in a small airplane before? And I said, no, hadn't. Well, would you ever like to try it? I said, sure. Yeah, I guess. I really was truly indifferent, which feels weird from this vantage point. And so one Saturday we met out at Norwood Memorial, which is a GA airport south of Boston, and went up flying. And I'm sure it looked exactly like every other Discovery flight, where the passenger gets to take the controls and they move the yoke about a quarter inch each direction and, say, okay, I'm done. The airplane didn't fall out of the sky. But the thing that struck me when we got back was just this notion that he could get in his airplane and go anywhere he wanted, anytime he wanted. Didn't have to tell anybody. It was fascinating to me. And that was kind of the spark for my getting involved.
Okay. So at the time you're going to college for something completely different. Did it cross your mind at that point that aviation could be a career? Or is this just something that seemed interesting?
No, it didn't. It just seemed like a foreign world to me, having had zero involvement. And even though I did a lot of the things that I think most people do, I got subscribed to Flying Magazine right away, and, read it from cover to cover. I just still never envisioned myself in an aviation career just because it was so foreign. And then I'd only had the 1 30-minute flight. Okay. So from that perspective, I just I couldn't envision it, and I didn't have enough interest at the time. I had some interest, but it was just something that was out there, and I just kind of knew I wanted to learn to fly, but more for the fun of it.
Okay. Is that something you did right away, or did that come later after college?
It was right after college, finished in 1989, June of 89, and moved to Chicago in January of 1990. So pretty much 6 months after moving, I jumped in and started learning to fly. Okay.
So you're going to college for music. What direction do you go with things from there? Like, what field do you end up getting into?
The paths are you're going to be a performer. You're going to perform on your instrument. You're going to be a teacher, music educator of some sort. You might be a composer. There was a major in film scoring, so writing music for film. There's a major in songwriting.
Interesting.
Just be a songwriter. There's a major in arranging. So literally the people that when you watch an award show and the band is playing, somebody arranged all that music, wrote all the parts for all the instruments. And so I was pursuing recording engineering because that was something that was of interest to me. And I was also still working on my instrument, which is piano.
Okay.
I kind of dove into those head first.
After college, what career track do you end up taking then?
I saw and learned enough in college and with a few professional engagements while I was in college, I saw enough to realize that the dues-paying road for a musician, and even more so for a recording engineer, was a long, long journey.
No kidding.
A decade before you might find yourself behind a console really doing recording. You had to be an assistant engineer at a studio, and then you're mainly responsible for wrapping up chords and sweeping the floor and learning while you're going. But the dues paying at that point was really high. And this was the pre-digital era.
Okay.
This is all analog stuff. So
recording to tape, things like that.
Yeah. So I discovered that it didn't appeal to me to hang out 10 years hoping that I would sort of make it big, or at least make a good living at being a recording engineer.
I think that people think about that with like the musician side. I don't know if people put as much stock into the recording engineer side that there's probably dues that you got to pay to get to the show with that one too, huh?
Yeah. And there's a lot of tracks to that. There, everybody envisions you're recording the band, making their next album, but there is all kinds of commercial recording that goes on every day for, media stuff you hear, radio, television, all those commercials and advertisements. There's a recording engineer behind all
I suppose. That. Interesting.
Yeah. So when I moved to Chicago, I didn't really have a plan and just kind of did some odd jobs and happened on a tiny company of just 4 people.
Okay.
That needed somebody to do kind of computer related stuff, which I had already been dabbling in college, and said, well, yeah, it'll pay the bills for a while. It's just, I'll take this job because I'm hungry and, little company, and I'll figure it out as I go.
I assume that you did figure it out and continued with that side of things. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because ironically, I retired from that company, 33 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what kind of roles did you take on within that company then? I know you said that you were, 4 employees when you got hired, and then?
Yeah, so they really just needed computer support.
Okay.
They used computers just a little bit for some of the data analysis that they did for banks.
Okay.
I kind of computerized the office, kind of got us streamlined in how our information flowed, and then started dabbling in some of the statistical processing software that would help us be more automated. And then we made a decision as a company to invest in building some software of our own that did the statistical analysis that we needed to do. So we kind of built our own little assembly line for data processing, where instead of doing analysis of one bank or one credit union at a time, we could throw the data from 100 of them into the system and crunch the numbers all together.
Okay.
And that became one of a couple of growth engines for the company, where they expanded to about 20 people and then 40 people. And at that point, we ended up writing software that we would sell to our clients to use that was based on our analysis.
Okay.
So now instead of just selling consulting services, you're licensing software, which from a revenue standpoint, that's a big multiple. So That was our growth engine. We grew to over 100 people and ended up being acquired by another company that was in the same business sector.
Gotcha. Was this all in Chicago, or was this in other parts of the country too throughout your journey in your career?
Well, the company was in Chicago. The company that acquired us was out of Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And that, our location remained Chicago. They remained Hartford. I did a lot of work within that company, ended up falling under the management team of the company that acquired us. It's kind of managing multiple software products, both the original ones and some from this company. And then ultimately that company got acquired by a very large Fortune 500 company in 2012. And so I became one of 44,000 at that point. Yeah.
And I think you started with a company of 4, and then you guys got to a point where you got these larger companies that are kind of bringing you into the fold with their operations. That's something.
Yeah. You want to talk transition. Yeah. And when anybody who's been through an acquisition kind of knows all of the emotional kinds of reactions that you have to that. And I certainly had them all in the first one. And then in the second acquisition, I was able to sit back and relax and be much more a part of the process and kind of understand what was going on.
And when you talk about the different emotions with that, I suppose that in an acquisition like that, there's times when they're merging these two groups together, and that doesn't necessarily mean all the spots from your group is going to come over to this new operation. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah. And it's where do I fit?
Yep.
And you want to be additive. You want to be seen as valuable. Sure. And for the most part, we had pretty good experiences in being acquired, I would say. And the thing that kept me in this career for so long was not so much the work itself. The work itself was challenging and interesting, but I didn't have a passion for it.
Okay.
But I had amazing people to work with the entire time. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but from original company to acquiring company to Fortune 500 company, I had just really stellar people to work with.
You said a word there that I picked up on that I want to go back on. You said that you didn't really have a passion for it, but you work with great people. So is this just for you? Was it just kind of a Monday through Friday? This is how I'm going to make my living, but it wasn't like I live for this job. I'm going to get up every day and just like this is the thing for me.
Yeah, it was an existence where I felt really fortunate to have the position that I had. And, the longer you stay, your income can grow. Yeah. So, I was pretty happy with how that was, and with great people. It wasn't really Monday through Friday very much of the time. It was more. It was pretty demanding a lot of time and a lot of travel involved. But I kind of stayed in that lane because it was less scary to me than maybe venturing out and seeing what else there might be that might not have as good of people that I had to work with.
There's gives and takes there, I think. So,
yeah.
So you had said that you retired from the company. Was this after like that last acquisition? Was that part of the process, or?
Well, no, it wasn't. What happened is that COVID came along.
Sure did.
A whole bunch of people that had jobs in the world suddenly had to figure out how to work remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been doing remote since about 2008.
Okay.
So we were actually really, really good at it. So when COVID came along, it didn't really affect our work so much. But after COVID, there was a push from management to get people back into offices. Yeah. And in my case, they wanted me to rejoin an office that was closer to headquarters in New Jersey. And by this point, I had moved from Chicago to Minnesota and was really liking every aspect of my life back in my home state, and wasn't really willing to move to New Jersey no matter what the terms. So the options that were given at that point were you can move to New Jersey and we'll take good care of you, or you can exit the company. And, my decision was to exit.
You mentioned at some point in there you moved back to Minnesota. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. When I lived in Chicago, I got married. I had two wonderful daughters. And at some point in there, my marriage ended. And there was a person in Minnesota that I very much wanted to be with, the person I'm with right now. And so that was the impetus for my move, to be with this person. Secondary to that, I'm from Minnesota. My parents live here and brother lives here. One of my brothers lives here. So there was a lot that attracted me, but there were also some surprises that awaited me, because I live in a little town that's about 30 miles south of Minneapolis, just a little town of 20,000 people, but it has an amazing artist and music community, and it has a true grassroots grass runway airport just 6 miles east of me.
Okay.
And so I somehow unwittingly landed at the intersection of a beautiful person that I can't imagine my life without, and a music community in which I can continue to play music because I love that very much, and an airport where I can fly out of. And essentially that airport and John, the manager of that airport, became kind of my launching pad for all the various things that I'm doing now.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just interesting sometimes how all these things can come together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit mind-boggling to me.
So I take it then you're talking about you've got this airport close by. Did you stay involved in aviation then after you got your license in 1990? Yeah,
I got my license in September of 1990, and I really was just a fair weather flyer. Love to fly, go fly on the weekends. There's no shortage of publications, articles about pilots who get their license and then have children and take various breaks. And my logbook shows all those same kinds of breaks from aviation, both from the time and the expense of it. But I kept doing it off and on, just to enjoy flying, really until I moved here. And that's when I was able to get involved with, Civil Air Patrol was one organization that I got involved in. And just having this airport so close by helped me connect in other ways. When I joined the squadron, before I joined, I said to the current senior members, the leadership, I said, just so we're clear, I'm here because I want to fly. Mm-hmm. You know, I love kids, love all of the things you're doing with the kids, but I'm not I don't really want to get deeply involved in that. I want to get involved in ways where I can fly airplanes.
Sure.
And that kind of manifested in helping with maintenance flights, eventually getting a glider tow pilot qualification, because all the CAP glider operations in the state, all the orientation rides happen at my home airport.
Okay.
Yeah, Stanton Airfield.
That's right, they do. Interesting.
Yeah. So being a tow pilot just 6 miles from the airport has its advantages. Yeah.
So you're involved with CAP. It sounds like you've got an active role at the airport too, just in general. Tell me a bit more about what else you're doing at the airport and how you're able to kind of leverage that as you're kind of building your aviation experience here.
Yeah, I think meeting the people that I met at the airport was my introduction to Civil Air Patrol, because Lori and I were just coming back from a flight one day, and they were having a little Saturday morning session, and that I didn't know about them, and we just kind of happened upon them. I mentioned John, the airport manager, who's one of my closest friends now. He has always found a way to just kind of push aviation things in my direction. He runs all the maintenance for the Minnesota wing. So, I get to see a lot of action that way. And I would rent the airplanes out of the airport and do the same thing I've been doing since 1990, taking friends flying just for the fun of it. So a little airport like that certainly needs a squadron of volunteers. And I became a volunteer, really eager to learn some of the various aspects of operating, most notably how to push an airplane around with a Kubota and not look like a drunken sailor, which I haven't yet mastered that, but I was going to say
that's a unique talent, I think.
Yes. But it is kind of a fun skill to work on, but just kind of learn as many of the aspects of the airport operation so I can at least contribute and help out.
That makes sense. So at some point there, what brought you to a decision where you thought, you know what, this aviation thing, I should make a career of this?
Yeah. This is the pivotal moment for me. In March of 2021, I was scheduled for cancer surgery on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Wow. And so we decided to take a little fun vacation, just a little getaway to Sedona, Arizona. rented an Airbnb down there. I found an airplane in Prescott to rent.
As you should.
So we rented a Cessna Cardinal out of there, flew over the Grand Canyon a couple times, flew all around the rock formations of Sedona, and just had a great time. And on March 12th, 2021, we were sitting in a bar on our last night in Sedona, and Lori just simply said, "So what do you think your retirement looks like?" And I hadn't ever really put words to some of the thoughts that were bouncing around in my head because, maybe it's a little scary to put it out there because maybe it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think I'd like to teach people to fly, and I'd like to find some kind of job where I can just fly airplanes for a living. And I mean, in that moment, Lori got really emotional, just saying that is exactly what you should be doing. That is exactly it. And this is in the blind of everything that was about to happen. I was still fully employed. There was no knowledge that there would be a company policy change, bring people to the office. As far as I was concerned, I was probably 7 or 8 years from, actual retirement from that job. And I was just going to keep on doing my thing and enjoying it. But having uttered those words kind of created a pathway, a possible pathway that surfaced for me, not even 9 months later.
So let's talk a bit about that then. So as you kind of make this proclamation of, I think I want to fly.
Yeah.
Where were you at as far as ratings, hours? Were you at a point where that was a realistic leap, or you're going to have to do some work?
It was going to be a big jump.
Okay.
I had been a VFR pilot my entire hobby career of flying. I probably had in the neighborhood of 400 some hours.
Okay.
Amassed over those, 20 some years. So not a lot of flying on an annual basis, and just nothing but VFR experience and very little training beyond that. And I really only flew single engine land. Nothing complex, nothing high performance. I had my tailwheel endorsement.
Okay.
And so I had been in thinking about, it's weird that I had thought about where I might want to go for school ahead of all these things happening, but I've just been kind of casually shopping as I bounced around.
Sure.
And I found a school in southern Minnesota that offered an accelerated program.
Oh, okay.
And I really felt like an accelerated program was going to be right for me, for how my brain takes in information. And ironically, with suddenly becoming not employed anymore, my daughter calls it fun employed.
That's one way to put it.
You have time to really devote.
Okay.
And so I selected that school. I talked to them in February 2022. I kind of knew when things were going to come to a conclusion with my job. So I kind of set things up to get on their schedule. And, June 30th, job ended. And in September, I began my pursuit, which I really had no idea what I was in for. But I had elected to just go instrument, commercial, multi-engine in just 25 days.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I was going to say, tell me a bit more about that accelerated program. So you mentioned that, you knew you wanted to take it at this pace. Was it everything you expected? Was it more?
So the quality of the school was even more than I expected.
Okay.
I really scouted them out because I wanted to see somebody who had a lot of success and demonstrate a history of. And you just join their Facebook page and see how they're turning out successful students. And that told me that they were doing things right. I went down and met with the owner and kind of showed me their curriculum and how they run it. And I met my future instructor, at that point, just kind of a shake of the hands. And so that kind of sealed the decision. So what the school offered was even more than I could have hoped for. What I didn't know was how I would react to the rigor of doing, daily study for something that I had not even dabbled in. You had to show up with the written exams done. So I had to show up.
All of them?
No,
Okay.
as you started each one. So
Okay, got it.
I actually took my commercial written in February of 2022 just because I had the time to knock it out.
Sure.
And I took the instrument ahead of starting with this program. And there's no written for multi-engine. So those I kind of knocked out. But boy, I think all beginning instrument students can remember that feeling of just not knowing what the heck you're doing and not knowing if you're ever going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And there are many, many days that I just asked myself, I don't know if I can do this or not, but I showed up and did it.
There you go. It's that determination and
yeah.
I wouldn't say motivation. That's one thing. It's discipline, I think.
Yeah.
Is a
and I always enjoyed it. I just didn't know if I could succeed. I really didn't know. But I figured there's only one way to find out. And that's, there was a ton of reward in actually getting through that. And getting all three, the commercial certificate, instrument rating, and multi-engine rating, all of them done in 25 days.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Was there anything specific that helped you through those moments of, I don't know that I can do this? Or was it just keep going?
It was keep going. Certainly at home, Lori understood, the psyche of that.
Sure.
And was supportive. But I had an hour's drive to this airport in southern Minnesota each way. And I was smart about it. I found some good aviation podcasts.
There you go.
And listening to a podcast was one way to kind of just settle my brain.
Yeah.
And fill it with new information. That's where I discovered our two friends, the air traffic controllers, who talk about all kinds of things aviation. It's where I discovered your podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Which kind of almost drove off the road when I heard that. Just the information available in it, so intriguing. I think the drive each way kind of calmed my brain, and let me just kind of reflect on things, and it gave me the ability to turn around and do it again the next day.
Sure. Very cool.
Yeah.
As you're working through this, I know that you did all the instrument commercial multi. Did you take a different step as well to, I assume you had to build some hours. Did you look at the CFI route, or which direction did you go from there?
Yeah. Well, remember I said in Sedona, I wanted to teach people to fly. Yeah. And there's another thing that I really had no idea what that entailed.
Okay.
What that experience would be like. But I really felt like it was something I wanted to do. So when I finished with this school, I set up some dates with them to do CFI.
Okay.
And that was in February of 2023. So I did take a break. I grabbed my friend John's Cherokee. Ironically, the same model Cherokee that my teacher Craig has still. And just took 10 days or so and just flew around the country.
Very cool.
Kind of a little semi-victory tour.
I mean, I suppose if you have to build the hours anyways, you might as well fly all over the country.
Yeah. And I didn't necessarily have hours building in my head at that point because I didn't really have a sense of what direction this was taking.
Okay.
I kind of knew that, well, if I had my CFI, well, then I can teach at Stanton, my home airport.
What
they had a spot for me. Okay. And I think most airports are getting calls weekly, people saying, I want to learn to fly. What do I need to do that? So I knew I had a path, but I signed up for CFI and I'm not going to stop there. I signed up for CFI, II, and MEI.
Okay.
Which I did starting in February and completed in 19 days straight.
Holy cow. I can't even imagine. I mean, I think I've taken 19 months to work on my CFI.
Yeah. And I think my personality, I probably wouldn't be able to do it over the long period of time.
I don't know that I'm doing it successfully.
I kind of have to, I kind of had to immerse myself in it.
Okay.
Very much. And there really wasn't anything harder that I've ever tried than the initial CFI rating. That just nearly broke me multiple times, just me saying, I don't think I can do this. And come back the next day and try it.
Now, when you say that, is that just a matter of you're taking it, you've got this information at hand already, right? Now you have to figure out a way to teach it to somebody. Was it that, or was it maneuvers from the right, or what was your struggle there? I think
the struggle was that the CFI certificate is kind of twofold. One is learning the execution of the airplane from the right seat and the teaching, and then in equal weight, there is learning how to teach people.
Absolutely.
The fundamentals of instruction that all educators have to go through. We have to master that curriculum, master the curriculum of teaching a primary student. And when you've never talked about how to do something before, it's a very awkward experience to be trying to explain to somebody how to do something. And my instructor, Kyle, he did a good job of being a really, really bad student sometimes. And I think he took particular joy in that, but he was a good teacher by giving me some very real world examples of students.
I think that my instructor, I mean, she's been instructing for forever, I think. But she's kind of the same way, where I will be walking through a ground lesson with her, and I can't tell if the look she's giving me is because she's being the confused student or it's because I've said something really stupid. So, yeah.
And on the backside of having this certificate and now teaching people, I can see why the fundamentals of instruction are really important.
Sure.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you knocked that one out quick too. That's impressive.
Well, yeah, I don't know how I did that. I think having a good school helped, good curriculum, and then just plowing forth.
So where did you take things from there?
Well, as soon as I finished my MEI, never really had any intention of teaching in a multi-engine airplane, really just was going to deal with primary students.
Okay.
I immediately started teaching at Stanton. We get lots of calls for different kinds of things. Primary students, we do a lot of tailwheel endorsements.
Okay.
So I immediately jumped in and very quickly had several students to work with. Okay. One gentleman that was about my age who had a 20-year dream of wanting to learn to fly and had built several companies and sold them. He was a very successful person, and he just really wanted to learn to fly, and I was kind of his starting point. And I also got that summer a 17-year-old girl who had decided that she wanted to be an airline pilot, and her mom brought her out to the airport to kind of test the waters, and I took them on that typical Discovery flight with mom in the back. And Whitney's was on a journey with me, my first private pilot student, and she's now about to finish her instrument rating at Minnesota State University. So,
cool!
I'm a proud instructor watching her journey continue on.
That's cool.
So I began instructing, kind of still not knowing what the path was, and between instructing and towing gliders for CAP during the summer, I was having a busy time. But I had also I'd also really dovetailed off to, I got to circle back to your podcast.
Okay.
Listening to your podcast, your first guest, Scott, talked about a job flying Beechcraft King Airs for a company out of Flying Cloud Airport in the southwest suburbs of Minneapolis. And I've had a little bit of a love affair with the King Air.
Okay.
Ever since on one of my solo flights as an early student, I did a solo to Janesville, Wisconsin, stopped, got my logbook signed, and I was walking back out to the airplane, and another guy walked out to a Beech King Air C-90 and hopped in, fired it up, and taxied out and took off. And I thought that was the most beautiful airplane I'd ever seen. I had such envy for what he was able to do. And I didn't understand a lick of what he did. And it just looked so cool. And I've always had a thing for that airplane, and I'm not sure why. But I was beginning to connect some dots that had sort of appeared before me. Your podcast and Scott's discussion of his making a transition out of his job into flying King Airs was one. And another was we were at a Civil Air Patrol event that's held annually at South St. Paul's Airport called the Aerospace Fling. And just imagine a little mini, fair with airplane static displays and flight simulators that kids can try out, and all kinds of tables that talk about what Civil Air Patrol does. And this event is open not only to all Civil Air Patrol people, but open to the public as well. Okay. And tons of people came out, and we decided to hop in John's airplane and take our goddaughter up there to just see some airplanes, have some of that famous free pizza that they offer at this thing. And we did. We landed, got marshaled in by some cap cadets. He got out, started walking around, and Lori said, "Hey, look over there, King Air." And, I kind of forgot why we were there and just kind of headed straight over there. And just kind of looked at the airplane and started chatting up the guy who was staffing the airplane, who was John. And John was the director of training for the company out of Flying Cloud. Okay. The one that Scott went to work for. Mm-hmm. And I told John, this is May of 2022. I told John, well, I'm retiring in a month, and I'm going to start getting my ratings this fall. And I really want to fly King Airs for a living. And John just said, well, great. Why don't you just come work for us?
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And seemed like a nice thing for him to say. Uh-huh. But he gave me his card, and he just said, hey, when you get done with your ratings this fall, give me a call. I'll have you down to the office and show you around, and we'll keep talking. And I did that. Okay. I called him and went down and you've heard of the nickel tour. He gave me the $5 tour. It was an hour and a half of walking around, showing me everything. I met probably most of the people in the building at that time, the CEO, the people at the dispatch desk, and just kind of gave me a flavor for what they did. Okay. And made me want to work there more than anything. Really just, and he just said, hey, when you get into that 700-hour territory or so, let us know. Just kind of keep dropping in. Let us know how you're doing. And so when I finished the CFI in February, I dropped in and, updated resume and all of that. And eventually in late June, I dropped in again and was able to meet the chief pilot and showed him my resume, kind of looked it over and asked what I was wanting. I said, I've learned so much that I really just want to work here, so I'm not applying anywhere else. Okay. I said, you get applicants that have, they have their applications in with anybody. I'm not going to the airlines. I don't have any interest in that. It's not that I'm too old or anything like that. It's just I'm not interested in airline flying. I want to fly a King Air, and I like to fly a lot of hops in a day, rather than one long leg to Shanghai,
Yeah.
And it was maybe a month later that I got a call for an interview and went in and was offered a job.
And I think I've heard from other people I've interviewed that like just showing up and making yourself known. I think even Scott maybe said this, just continuing to be present, continuing to show that interest can go a long way too, and building those networks.
Yeah. And it's hard to tell my story in a linear fashion as I'm discovering. Scott was so instrumental along the way. When I heard the podcast, I immediately sent him a note through LinkedIn saying, I would love to talk to you about your experience with this company. And as we had a conversation at some point, and just made me want to be there more. And then when it came to an interview, I called Scott and said, hey, what should I be thinking about? He just kind of gave me a bullet list of things to be thinking about and ready for. But that networking idea is so important. And to me now, it is so important that I try to impress it upon my students.
Okay.
If somebody shows up at Stanton while we're doing a lesson, it's somebody that I think they should know, I will stop and introduce my student to that person. And I've done this many times with my students. They will all attest to it. No matter where we are, I'll run into somebody I know. Oh, you need to meet this person. And especially my student Whitney, and knowing she was going to Minnesota State, I know a lot of folks down there. And when I'd run across them, I'd stop, introduce, and I said, now, next time you see this person at the airport in Mankato, stop and remind them who you are. And I don't know if they're taking that advice or not, but it seems to...
They'd be wise to.
And it certainly has held true for me that showing people where your passion is and telling people what you want to do is kind of indicating that you're willing to do a lot of things to achieve the goal you're talking about.
For sure.
And I just kind of discovered I got a lot of help by doing that.
So I take it in this process, you find your way into this company flying King Airs.
Yeah, they offered me a job in late July of 2023. So basically a year and a little more after I exited the company. Ironically, the dates that the dates that connect or that are parallel in my story are strange. March 12th of 2021, Lori and I are talking in a bar, and I say, hey, I think I'd like to teach people to fly and find a job to, fly for a living. And March 12th, the exact same day, 2023, I take my CFI check ride.
That's awesome.
So exactly 2 years later, I started with my original company July 26th, 1989, and I got my job offer for the company out of Flying Cloud July 26th, 2023. Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's crazy.
Very interesting.
And they said, if we did offer you a job, when could you start? And I looked at my watch and I said 3:00, and I was ready. I really just...
That's a great answer.
I knew this is where I wanted to be. And I started August 1st of 2023 as a first officer on a King Air.
So what kind of flying are you doing once you get into the King Air?
Yeah, this company is kind of unique in that about 80% of our business is flying medevac.
Okay.
So we have a contract with LifeSource, and we have a contract with NORA, who's kind of a sister organization to LifeSource in a different region. LifeSource covers the Dakotas, Iowa. I don't know all the states, but NORA covers Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois.
Okay.
And so I didn't know anything about what happens in an organ donation process, but in a short synopsis, something terrible happens to somebody who has either already pre-identified themselves as an organ donor. And shout out for organ donation. If you're not registered to be an organ donor, I encourage anybody listening to do that.
Absolutely.
I've just seen the multiple of lives available to save or improve by one person's generosity, and it's especially generosity of that person and then the generosity of their family in the face of the tragedy that has occurred. So when this happens, there are nurses that staff this case, that work with the families, that work with kind of the biologics that have to happen around organ donation, tissue sampling and type matching, and what organs might be available, and who do we have that would be recipients, and all this. It's a very complex process of matching an organ to a recipient from this donor based on all the attributes of the donor.
Okay.
And so there's a period of days that typically will go on where we will fly nurses from wherever they happen to be based out to wherever the donor site is. And there are some pretty standard sites that we work with: Fargo, Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Duluth, places that we know very well now. And then when it's time for organs to be harvested, then we will also go pick up surgical teams, typically out of St. Paul or Rochester, Mayo, and take them to the site, wait on the ground for them while they do the procurement. They come back to the airplane with organ or organs, and we deliver them back to the hospital site where we pick them up. These things usually happen at night. That's when surgical suites are unscheduled. They're available.
Okay.
So we do a lot of flying at night. The other 20% of our business is charter. The more traditional passengers need to get from point A to point B or multiple points, then we do that for them. And that's a great gig as well. But I really enjoy being a part of a team that is doing some real direct life-saving kinds of things.
Sure. Yeah, I bet that's got to be pretty. I wasn't, I guess, familiar with that you would bring like this whole surgical team with you. That I just naively thought if you're picking up, you go and pick up and bring it back.
Yeah, and it's there are those occasions. I just had one just fly to Madison and pick up an organ that was already packaged in a box and bring it back. That's rare. Usually we're taking the teams out to do that, and we're on the ground for 4 to 6 hours waiting on them.
Okay. All right. So you're flying as a first officer on the King Air. Where do things go from there? Are you able to advance further, or what steps come next?
Yeah. So I joined with about 750 hours or so, and quickly start building hours at a much faster rate.
I bet you did.
And as I started to get toward, I'd say within 150 hours of 1,500, I asked our chief pilot if they were interested in me getting my ATP. ATP is required on our certificate in order to be a captain. Okay. All of our captains are ATPs. And so the company will, if you're planning to be around and not scoot off to the airlines, company will invest in you.
Sure.
And so I did my ATP CTP course in February of 2024. And then in May of 2024, did the in-airplane training for the ATP.
Okay.
It took my check ride May 26th. There's absolutely nothing special about that date. I can't relate it to any others.
Not yet.
Not yet. But yeah, I got my multi-engine ATP in then. And then the other thing that the company requires for any captain upgrade is a year in service.
Okay.
They essentially want you to see all 4 seasons.
Sure.
Because we tend to fly in all the weather because of the kinds of flying that we do.
Okay.
So they want you exposed to that. I'm a bit of an anomaly in the company. There are 3 of us in the company who came in as first officers and upgraded to captain. All 3 of us are retired from a prior career. The remaining captains are largely retired airline folks.
Okay.
With phenomenal experience, really just excellent to fly with because you're going to learn something from what these folks have to share. So a year in service was August 1st of 2024, and had to do my annual, recurrent training and recurrent check ride then. And they went ahead and did the captain PIC check ride for me.
Awesome.
And I went through the upgrade training. So August 12th of 2024, I became a captain.
So within your company, what's the difference for you guys for moving from that first officer seat into the captain seat as far as your duties and responsibilities for these flights?
Yeah, the execution of the flight, the duties are pretty well defined. The first officer does the airplane pre-flight. They do the interior prep of the airplane.
Okay.
Kind of get ready to have passengers on the plane. The captain does all of the flight planning, all of the weight and balance calculation, and all the paperwork that we need to complete prior to beginning a flight. When we are doing these medevac related flights, we're given a 2-hour call out. So when we get called to go fly, it's typical that we need to be wheels up in 2 hours from the time we're called. I live 45 minutes from Flying Cloud, so I have an hour and 15 minutes to do whatever it is I need to do. Flight planning takes anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the planning, the fuel requirements. We often will load our airplanes up with people and equipment, for the surgeons.
Okay.
And so figuring out what fuel you can carry to maximize what you need takes some time sometimes. But captain's responsible for all that planning, and obviously they are the designated PIC for every flight. So kind of that, the thing that they didn't tell me in upgrading to captain was how much heavier that 4th stripe is.
Yeah.
And I still feel the weight of it every day. I learn something new every time I fly in this new role, and I hope I continue to. But it is it makes the job even more interesting to accept and bear the responsibility for successful outcome. We have a great operation. We're a 100% 2-pilot operation. We have I fly with excellent people every single day. Even the new first officers that come in, I'm sure they fly way better than I did when I joined. It's just really, really great. It makes it comfortable to come in and know that we can deliver a service safely and efficiently, in spite of the things that can happen, like weather. It's a great outfit to work for. So I don't have a lot of stress associated with being a captain. It's a responsibility, but I have a lot of support for doing it.
All right. In your current role, I know that you talked earlier about your last career. You didn't necessarily have a passion for it. Have you found it now?
Yeah. The joke around the house is we work a 8 days on, 6 days off shift.
Okay.
So when you're on duty, you can be called at any point to go do a trip. And when you end that trip, you've got, if it's kind of a standard thing, you've got the 10 hours of defined rest time.
Yep.
Per Part 135 rules. Longer if under certain circumstances. But in a duty period, the longer it goes where I haven't been called, Lori will say, the mopier you get. And it's very true. It's ironic to be at home, being paid. I'm a salaried employee, being paid to be at home, maybe doing something else, and wishing I could go to work. So there's no question that I have found it, and even in the rougher parts of the job where you might have a normal day at home doing laundry or whatever, and then the phone rings at 9:45 p.m. You've been up since 6:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And they're like, yep, 2-hour call out. We need you to go here, 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 and here. You can be on the ground for 5 hours and then go here, here, and here, and here. And during those 5 hours, you can catch a little sleep, typically.
Sure.
And you learn how to do that. But you'll find that you've been up now for, 23, 25 hours.
Been up for a bit.
Yeah. And you kind of learn to manage that. But I look at that, and where it's hard, or where I come back from an overnight trip and I pull into the driveway at 6:45 in the morning. I've been flying all night, and I know I'm going to be a zombie for the next 12 hours.
Right.
And I just go, yeah, but this is so great. So, no question, I found it.
I think that I was going to ask specifically, like as a segue, pros and cons, but I think you kind of covered it, unless you have others that you want to talk about.
I think the thing that about almost any flying job is the schedule.
Okay.
That, you operate at various hours of the day. The airlines do, charter operations do. And in our case, where a lot of our stuff is on demand, you call and we go, your hours are not necessarily predictable, and you have to figure out how you function under various levels of fatigue.
Sure.
And for me, I've had to figure out what my behaviors are so that I can compensate for them or be aware of them and learn how to slow down through the predictable parts of them.
Yeah.
Where, ATC gives me an altitude and I read back the correct altitude and I, dial in the wrong one, on the altitude bug. Well, I'm aware that that's one of the things that I've seen myself do under a fatigue situation.
Sure.
So it's, I wouldn't call it a con, but that's one of the larger challenges, is learning how to function at all different hours of the day, especially during that midnight to 6 window, which is a little harder on the human body.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of advice can you give for someone who might be looking to make a career change?
Yeah, if you're like me and you were in a job for a long time, I think the thing that I learned was to ask myself, do I really want this? Do I really want to try this thing that I'm looking at in aviation? And if the answer is yes, then kind of push yourself in that direction. Take that chance. I stayed comfortably in my career for a long time because I wasn't willing to take the chance. So I'm not really sure if I would have had a different aviation career, if I'd have discovered it I discovered aviation in a pretty cool way for me.
Yeah.
But take that chance. And I think there's no shortage of people to go ask about what you're thinking about. I never ran into anybody that wasn't willing to talk to me about my aspirations and offer their version of a pathway to that dream.
For sure. Yeah.
And
one of the great things about aviation, I think.
Yeah. Most of us think about a career in aviation as flying for Delta. Mm-hmm. And certainly that's an excellent career, but I'm just amazed at how many aviation careers exist outside of the major airlines. And, in my particular case, I've got a flying job where I fly most days that I'm on duty, and I'm home every single day that I'm on duty, which is for somebody that had a job where I did a lot of travel. That's a great benefit. Networking is kind of one version of the talking to people, and then just reaching out to people that are doing something that you think is interesting. I heard this podcast called Fly the Transition, and this guy was doing something that sounded exactly like what I want to do. And I figured out a way to get in touch with him. And it took a little bit, it took a LinkedIn message and took a while for Scott to see it, but he responded, and he responded with generosity and, continuous engagement with me whenever I wanted it. Also get some advice on where you're at in your flying experience and truly evaluate what it's going to take to get to that initial, I'm eligible to be hired. And at where I work, the minimum requirement is 500 hours, a multi-engine rating, instrument rating, commercial, first-class medical. So that's not a terribly high bar to try to achieve. We tend to look for CFIs.
Okay.
Because the CFI experience is a kind of flying that's valuable. You understand what's going on with the airplane without actually flying it.
Sure.
But figure out what what's going to take from where you're at to where you want to be, whether it's 500 hours, multi-instrument, and make sure that that's a path that seems like you can get there.
Great advice.
Yeah. Join Civil Air Patrol. Great. As you can build hours, fly kids on orientation rides. You are part of a very large squadron that does a ton of that stuff. Chance to fly on somebody else's dime.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big benefit of that. And not only that, but especially doing orientation flights, that ability to share aviation with these bright-eyed kids that are just starting to get into it. I think that's just so cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you got for me before I do the actual outro part?
No, Jim, I want to thank you for having this podcast, because I really do believe that you are part of the dots that got connected for me to be doing the thing that I'm doing now. If not for your podcast, I don't meet Scott, and I don't have that window into this company. What you're doing is I'm really, really important. It was important in my life, and that's enough for me, but thank you for doing it.
Well, I really, really appreciate that. You don't know how much that means. So thank you so much for that. And on another note, thank you so much for joining me on this episode to share your story, and hopefully this can resonate with somebody else and we can just keep passing that baton.
I hope so.
Well, that was a great conversation, and I really appreciate Curt taking the time to sit down and chat with me. Curt's story really captures so much of what Fly the Transition is about. Rediscovering who you are, taking chances, and being willing to step into something new, even when it's scary. For decades, he stuck with what was safe and familiar, and one of the comments he made that stuck out to me was that he stayed in his lane because it was less scary than venturing out. But it turns out once the opportunity presented itself and he gave himself permission to explore that aviation dream, things really started to click. And the thing I love the most about this is he didn't go it alone. He reached out, he connected, he listened to other stories, he built relationships both at his airport and with others, and he found someone who had walked the road ahead of him, and he wasn't afraid to reach out and say, hey, how did you get there? And now, through that determination, he's flying the King Air. And the thing that's really humbling for me that I keep coming back to is that this podcast helped play a role in some of that. And that to me is a big deal because I just do this for fun and to help share stories, but it helped me realize that this can still have a real impact for people, and that's really humbling for me as I put these together. So when Curt shares with me that our first episode is what helped him reach out to someone who can give him mentorship and guidance, and that somehow this show helped him take those next steps, I don't take that lightly. So to you, Curt, thank you once again. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. and thank you for reminding me why this matters. And now I hope maybe 51 episodes from this, someone else will be on here to say how Curt's story really helped inspire them to get them where they wanted to go in aviation. So if you are sitting back listening to Curt's episode and it's inspiring you and you hear the call of aviation, don't ignore it. And maybe someday we'll tell your story on Fly the Transition. Well, speaking of telling stories, if you have a story you want to share, whether you're in the middle of a transition or you've made it to the other side, I want to hear from you. Seriously, you can message me on social media, email me at flythetransition@gmail.com, and maybe your journey will be the one that sparks inspiration for someone else out there. Also, if you've got any questions, ideas for a future episode, someone that you'd like to drag in to be a guest on their behalf, or you just want to say hi, I would love to connect, so you can also email me or reach out to me on any of my social medias as well. And if you forgot what I had said, they're down in the show notes for you as well. And finally, if you like what I'm doing, I really hope that you will take a moment and like the podcast, share it with others, leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and I just might read your review on a future episode. And finally, if you're looking for ways to support the Fly the Transition podcast, you can go visit us on Patreon. I'm starting to put early releases of all my different brands of content on the Flying Midwest Patreon. So that's patreon.com/Flying Midwest. And you can either join for free or you can offer support monetarily that will help to keep this podcast and other Flying Midwest media endeavors moving right along. So thank you once again for tuning in to this episode of Fly the Transition. And until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your dreams soaring high.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.